Wow, welcome friends. Let's have a third round. Get your boxing gloves on and start beating up each other. No,
Well,
let's beat up ideas. Shape them into a diamond.
or we can be surgical and find the error in each other and see if we can just like put a circle around it, and then the person in their idea processing can consider, does that really belong there? Yes or no? Do I want to excise that, or do I want to better explain it, maybe replace a certain word with a different word?
Oh, let's see if we can do that. Let's see, whiteboard. So let's see. So let's see. All men are mortal. Socrates was a man.
Welcome back, Mike, to round 3. Thank you for joining us in round 2. Yes, that's an excellent example of flawed logic. And now, does anyone want to make a comment?
Why do you claim it's flawed?
Oh, I see what you're saying. Well, only because Socrates is a definite name. So we know Socrates, and we can utilize the Socratic method that from whose name we borrow this idea. We don't even know that Socrates was necessarily real, because what we know of him was through Plato, right? He could have been an imagination, but I think he probably was an actual character. And then what we get is the written version of that character through Plato. But his methodology is definitely real and useful. All I know is that I know nothing. And then come at it so that you can question any and everything, all the precepts that others are having. And walk as though you have no other precepts other than that you don't really know. I love that, because it allows you to jump to first principles so often.
Socrates first and say, therefore, Socrates is mortal.
Right. Therefore, Socrates is mortal.
There. That's how we will dissect our premises.
Does anyone else have any other solutions?
And our conclusions, or we will analyze our conclusions and and put them on the whiteboard and draw on them with a marker. Are you able to draw?
Nope.
Oh. Or maybe I have to hit share. No. Do you have, oh, when you click on the whiteboard, the pencil mark, the pencil thing, doesn't that bring up tools?
I don't have a whiteboard option.
What? Oh, maybe I have to share capability.
Okay, Dominic wrote in the chat, man and min are different beings. One is immortal, the other is mortal. Okay, so I think he's saying specific men are mortal, and then he's saying that man is immortal. immortal, but I don't necessarily agree that man is immortal. At least not if you read the Hebrew and Christian scriptures.
More.
Would you like to defend your position, Dominic, or say otherwise, or ask a question that in follow-up to the statement that man is not immortal? I'm saying our species, mankind. Go ahead.
Immortals actually are beings from the ether. Men, M-E-N, are actually a physical being. They can live up to 120 years. The other ones can live up to 1,000 years based on the clock of the sun and the moon. Now, whether people grasp that, that's up to them. There's beings that still exist us that can live within the physical vessel up to a certain period of time. That's why Sanskrit was created. It was created for the purpose of actually sound and frequency and vibration, where you can play with the molecules. There's not written work on that kind of stuff.
All right, so long as there's an observer and the idea is not forgot, I think the concept of man may be immortal. I'm interested on that, like, so I'm not necessarily going to encourage you where you've gotten it right, because I think I've already done that. But I think we need to delve into the part that isn't quite right.
Wow.
Or at least that's questionable, the idea of man being immortal. Where do you get that idea from?
Is he saying M-E-N as in all mankind is immortal versus one man being mortal?
It's in the chat. You can read his statement. And Dominic, you're welcome to go and revise and write a new version of your statement.
Man and men are different beings. One is
Only way
immortal.
I can write it is if I talk about lords. There's Lord gods, there's lords. They're just rulers. They're just different beings. But
I have a landlord.
yep. Well, actually, that's misleading too. We've been going around for quite a few generations talking about landlords. Most people pay property tax, so they're not even landlords. They're not rulers of land. They're actually, they're owners. There's householders, and then there's people that are actually in the housing business. So the term landlord to a person that's renting is actually a misguided view, but that's how humans can easily be misinterpreted on things. Landlord, lord of land. If you pay taxes, you're not a land of lord.
Right. You would need something known as a laudal title, which Thomas Jefferson was actually in favor of.
Yes, and in America and Canada, very few people actually have allodial rights or titles in that case. Yes.
Welcome, Justin, to session 3 of the morning.
Session 3 of the morning. You had 2 already.
Yes. We started an hour and a half ago with Luis Del Pino had to leave. He usually stays for only an hour or an hour and a half. He just left. You missed him again.
Right,
What
so
time is it in London?
Like 20 past 1.
What time is it?
Past 1.
Should be
Oh, I
about
can't hear you.
6 p.m. in London.
Past 1.
Ah.
Can you hear me okay now?
No, your audio is still pretty poor.
Oh, I tried to adjust it before I joined. Sorry.
We can hear you, but it's kind of distant.
All right, so I'd like to get back to the initial sentence that you gave here, Dominic, and you wrote, quote, Dominic Tursigny. Am I pronouncing your last name correctly?
Tersini?
So Dominic gave us 5 minutes ago, man and men are different beings. One is immortal, the other is mortal. Immortal. What do we mean by immortal? Are we meaning like infinite, always, or undying? I think that's what it must mean, immortal, undying. Well, perhaps some men are immortal. Like if we define a man as his soul, and then there would be body and soul, and that these would be separable items. Perhaps the body dies. I mean, we all know that our bodies die and return to dust. But then
Rami, I'm using it as in the form. Immortal is actually more longevity.
Okay.
It's not about death. It's not about living forever. It's a consciousness source that some of them actually don't lose consciousness. Like we live in a magnetic polarity. So picture when you have two strong magnets, you can delete any kind of memory. Because we have blood in us, that actually can be erased. That's where memory is stored within the blood. Now,
Okay.
whether or not, go ahead.
I have to ask because this is necessary. It's, I believe, safe to do because I believe marijuana is legal in Canada. Have you taken any marijuana substances within the past 7 days?
If you're gonna, first of all, I don't do things like ayahuasca and hemp and all that kind of stuff. That's actually a weak alteration of the mind. So no, if you're trying to imply that what I'm sharing, you're using the sheer lineal mind to try to understand this. So, but to answer your question, no.
Okay, thank you. And
And
it
it's
is
actually
legal
hemp.
there in
It's
Canada,
actually
right?
marijuana is actually a name that was falsely accused. It's not the word marijuana. It's hemp. We're gonna really talk about it. And hemp has many usages, and it's not just solely for the consuming through the oral. You can actually take it through your skin, through clothing, all that kind of stuff. So if you're going to ask those kind of questions, make sure you're pretty in depth on understanding how things work.
Sure.
Please, thank you.
Thank you. Well, okay. So if I may, I hope I'm not insulting you at all by asking.
You're insulting more yourself than me. It's of no concern to me, Rami.
Okay.
I'm just going to share.
Well,
I'm just
I
going
may
to share.
be ignorant, and I'm open to correction. So are you utilizing any hemp-based products?
No.
Okay. Not even like a shirt or a rope?
No.
Okay. All right. So
now my question is to you now. In a roundabout way, what clever game were you trying to play by asking me that question? Please share openly, because I've shared openly.
Absolutely.
Are you trying to think I'm delusional?
No, not necessarily. Well, I mean,
hold on. Yes or no? Yes or no?
I don't know. I'm
Okay.
asking questions to explore to try to determine the answer.
To answer by what doing substance? Why don't you ask me if I ate tomatoes? Why don't you ask me if I actually had vegetables today, or I ate meat?
Let me ask you a better question. Do you like tomatoes?
With my blood type, the acidity I can handle, and yes, I do enjoy it because it's a nice fruit to enjoy. So yes.
Interesting. I sometimes can handle a tomato. Other times I cannot.
Depends on your blood
My
type.
experience. It could be blood type related.
Usually A, Bs can handle the acidity in tomatoes. A's, O's, and Bs can't usually handle it.
Oh, you've taught me something new today. Thank you, Dominic. So I guess there are two questions on the table, actually three. First of all, what are the laws in Canada regarding that type of substance? Because I don't live in your country.
Well, if you're going to ask me about this, I find it kind of humorous when somebody says it's legal to put anything in your mouth and it's illegal. So that just tells me humanity's still kind of a little bit of a sleep. If you want to put anything in your mouth, let alone poison, the one thing you're going to do with poison, if you actually have some sort of life insurance, you void it. But you can do whatever you want to your sovereign being. So if you want to you want to smoke weed, you want to put tomatoes in your mouth, you want to drink alcohol, whatever you want to do. Now, if it's natural, your body could probably handle it or assimilate it in some way. So
there are a lot of natural poisons
but
that the body can't handle.
Yes.
it could be
very much so,
illegal.
Justin. Very much.
It could be illegal if what you put in is designed to kill you. So that would be committing suicide. So isn't committing suicide illegal?
Because it's a
somewhere?
subset of murder, self-murder.
Yes, if you do it, you will be severely punished.
Yeah, but isn't that because of Christianity?
Oh,
Yes.
The real issue there is you're ending something that would otherwise already end in a relatively short order of time in the long view. So usually when people are contemplating suicide, they're in a really bad place. And most suicide attempts are actually calls for help.
That's a very important point. Although I think there's a very good argument for legalizing euthanasia. You know, when people are in good, a good sound mind, and let's say, for example, are dying of a very painful illness and make a conscious choice that they want to die, I think there's a very strong case for that should just be allowed. It's actually rather strange, except maybe from a Christian perspective, because they believe in like eternal damnation for a suicide. Well, I think apart from that, it's irrational to make that illegal.
Allow me to provide, let's say, the Stoic perspective. For instance, the obstacle is the way. The obstacle is the pain. The obstacle is getting through the pain. The obstacle is the way in in that you go through the process and then out on the other side, amazing things happen.
But the other side of a painful terminal illness is death.
Well, okay, so let's take what you stated was the case of the argument for. So let's say someone is suffering through tremendous pain. They've suffered a compound fracture of the femur. Their leg is literally broken open. You can see the flesh, you can see the bone.
Yeah.
You can take morphine, inject that person, and suddenly they're disconnected from the pain and are in a state of euphoria. Now, you can give an injection that would be enough to remove them from the pain and put them into that state of euphoria, and then work to try to repair that, because even though that may lead to like arthritic type pain later in the future, it's still better to maintain the consciousness.
Especially if
the remainder of that
for example,
lifetime.
they might die of shock, for example, if they weren't
Right.
given the painkiller. So yeah,
That's a possibility too. And of course, our system will generate drugs such as putting ourselves into shock so that we don't necessarily feel the pain. We can be conscious and look down, and the shock, because our brain has already produced the thing that blocks the pain because it's so harsh. Yeah, you're right. But in terms of the long term,
what if you're driving in a one lane road and you see a Mack truck approaching you, and there's trees or walls on both sides? There's no way to go veer right or left, so you know you're going to die, and the truck is not slowing down. So what is there a shock system in the body to eject your consciousness out of the body so that you don't feel anything?
Well, hopefully
dissociation.
Hopefully both drivers are being active drivers and are moving their feet off the accelerator and onto the brakes and slamming as hard as they possibly can, so that even if there is an accident, the consequences will be minimized. Like, it's okay if the metal gets crumpled, but if airbags deploy, or even if you get slightly injured, that's a whole lot better. Now, there are cases where someone might freeze up and accidentally slam on the accelerator and make that situation worse. But I think that in general, most beings have a self-preservation principle that would cause them to, if not be able to escape the harm, at least minimize it.
But what if all that is out of off the table, and the truck is coming at you at 80 miles an hour, and you're going at it at 80 miles an hour, and you're in a little.
So you're asking what happens to the soul at that point?
What happens a second before? What happens a second before to the consciousness when you realize this is your last millisecond left? Does it go into a shock?
Well,
or does it stay alive? Does it go into a shock to minimize?
Well, you can give other
pain?
examples, like being eaten by a wild animal, for example. You can go into shock and then not experience the pain of what's happening.
Right.
I think that's fairly common. And it's in one way, it can even be a benefit, because you can just be lying there, like being munched on, and then actually, or about to be munched on, and then the animal can think you're dead. And sometimes, because of their own habitual tendency of not eating dead animals, they can actually walk off. I've seen even a video of this with like some kind of gazelle or something, but we can imagine maybe similar for humans. So we think of it as like playing dead, but they could just be totally dissociated. And then once it's kind of safe enough, they run off, and then you'll see once animals are out of the danger, then the chemistry changes, and they'll be shaking like crazy, shaking, I don't know, some of that chemistry out, it would seem. And maybe that's what humans sometimes suppress, is that, dissociation is an adaptive response, but then you need to process the trauma afterwards at some stage. Otherwise, it just keeps cycling, which is why so many of us need to go to psychotherapy. So don't block the shake response, and sometimes we need to even activate that in therapy to try and process some of this.
What would your last words be, Rami? Would you say oh my God. And with Luis Del Pino say, oh my reality. And with Justin say, oh my Buddha.
Well,
And Mike Taylor would say, oh my Taylor series. No, what would he say? Oh, who's your favorite mathematician, Mike?
I would probably recite the fundamental theorem of calculus. Very well.
just to extend the amount of
Oh
time.
my fundamental theorem of calculus. That will take you to the pure land of Euclid's geometry, or non-Euclid geometry somewhere. In the pure mathematical heaven land.
Central Florida Philosophy Meetup. I forgot your name. Sorry.
No problem. I'm going to read.
Oh, Rami, was it?
That's right. Very
Oh,
good.
yeah, I got it. Rami, you were saying, I think you were going somewhere when you said about, I think it was in the context of euthanasia, and then you said if a person had broken their leg.
Mhm.
I was curious where you were going with that, and whether it was a terminal condition.
Well, I was giving an example of giving a morphine. Now, there's the argument of the quote unquote terminal cancer patient who, let's say, has bone cancer and everything feels like it's broken, or you've got dengue fever where you're just asking people to put you out of your misery because it feels like your bones are broken. Dengue fever, I think there are cures to it, actually. In other words, which is better? I think it's fairly obvious that it's better to be cured rather than to be euthanized.
Well, that's interesting that you think it's obvious. I think it's not entirely obvious.
Okay.
It would depend on, because sometimes we think, okay, death or not death. Well, definitely not death is better. But I think some people would think about, well, quality of life versus death. So simply being cured, there are more variables, like, well, what has one had to experience and for how much time before the cure, or even what is the condition of life after the cure. So I think these should, I think I can't have a totally black and white view on life is always better than death.
Pain shapes experiences and also attitudes. It will form you into a particular way.
Yes.
Pain has all sorts of things that if anyone here has ever experienced any sort of pain, you understand what pain is from the phenomenal and from the experiential.
Yes.
However, one of the benefits of pain is that it also has the nature of sharpening the mind and helping you to eliminate irrelevancies. In other words, just get to the point already.
Yes.
Now, you can take that too far, but it allows, take, for instance, the popular television series from the 2000s, starring Hugh Laurie, House. Here's a character who's a doctor, who's a brilliant doctor, who, I don't know if you've ever seen
Is
House.
it the American when he's American?
Yes, yeah,
he's a doctor. Oh yeah, that's good.
In that series.
He's a pain medication addict also.
Yes, but a fellow in constant pain, he has to deal with that in the series. But notice how sharp he is. Part of that is a result. My wife is a woman who deals with constant pain.
Right.
And she is so quick and to the point. Not just quick-witted, but also her father was in the Navy and trained her to be very fast. But it really does give you another kind of perspective, which is useful from a societal level. And when you start eliminating the people in constant pain, then you lose essential perspectives within the realm of mankind's thoughts. An example that would be a very valuable example would be the 1970s movie Logan's Run, where everyone dies at 30. So very few people experience pain. Or let's say the first Buddha's father, I don't know if he was the first, but he tried to prevent him from ever seeing aging by dyeing his hair. And
so the legend goes. Yeah, I'm a little bit skeptical about
until you get out of that artificial reality of let's keep everything nice and there's nothing wrong and no harm will ever come to you. You're limited in your growth in terms of where you can go conceptually and in terms of understanding, in terms of spiritual.
Hyro is in pain until he gets to speak.
Go ahead.
I thought it was either that or some form of yoga.
I thought he was
Yes.
practicing
I'm
the Statue of
an
Liberty.
ascetic now because Rami has inspired me to have constant pain. So I'm going to keep my hand raised for the rest of my life. And
I
that
met
would
someone-
be-
I met someone who did that for like
Waited.
7 years, something like 7 years. His fingernails were
they-
like growing around and stuff, and his arm was all withered.
Yes, I think they still do that in India. Those
Yeah, I've met one. I've
yogis.
chilled
they-
with one.
When
Funny fellow.
and there's a movie about enlightenment or something like that, and they go to India for the Kumbh Mela, and they have yogis from all over India come to one place in India that's sacred every 12 years, and so there's thousands of yogis. There's naked yogis that are covered with ash,
Nagababas,
running naked.
yeah.
and they show some yogis that have their arms raised, and they say, yeah, I've had this raised for 12 years. So I'm gonna start doing that. Maybe I'll be witty or something.
Rami, so I'm just to bring it back to the topic. I totally acknowledge that we can benefit from pain, and we can learn from pain, and we can grow from pain. But even the same painful experience, two people can have, and one can come out sort of better off, or not even come out, stay in even better off potentially. And someone else can be cripplingly traumatized and really be what we'd say in England, they'd be fucked. So, oh, you guys are all muted. Interesting. So, yeah, I'm not saying that it's
not
black and white, like pain is bad or something. But let's say if someone is, I don't know, let's say someone is in their 80s and then gets really physically ill and has a really painful time, and they feel satisfied with that they've had the life that they've had, and they think, okay, I could live for, let's say, another 5 years in real pain and being a real burden on other people, and I personally want to die now. Like in a lot of traditional societies, maybe then they could just choose to die. They could stop eating, or they could overdose on opium or whatever. But then in some countries, it's like there can be a cultural pressure on them. No, it is bad. You will go to hell forever if you do that. It's so terrible. Or I don't want you to go. And of course, I don't want you to go can be a wonderful thing if the person kind of wants that feeling, or if it touches them, or even if they still want to die, it can be very touching to know, oh, they want me to stay. But even bearing that in mind, actually, I still want to go for my sake. Then I think it's strange when if then a government steps in and says, I don't care what you think, I don't care what you want to do with your life, I don't care how you want to end your life, we're going to impose our cultural taboo on you with the law. We're going to control even your death. That for me is extreme.
Yeah, I'm a bit more hands-off when it comes to the government. And both forms, whether to go or to stay, could be framed in terms of selfishness, because maybe the person wants freedom from the pain and they're willing to give up their life here on earth in order to have that freedom. That's a form of selfishness. Or there's a version of the let's say family members who want them to stay, or the community who wants them to stay.
Yeah,
that's a form of selfishness. But if I think there has to be an exchange between the two. In other words, like the quality of life, if it's super low, but you still want them to continue to exist, you have to be willing to put into what it takes to raise the quality of life for that person.
Yeah, that sounds very reasonable. Yeah.
Let me give an illustration of this business of whether life should continue or not. I have told the kids when I pass on, prop me against a wall, spray me with fixative, and continue to cash those pension checks.
And I'm sure
Clearly.
you'll still be a very attentive listener for them.
Yes, clearly, there's an important reason for keeping life, quote unquote, to continue.
All right. I want to, that's a very funny scenario, and I appreciate for you, Mike, sharing that with us again. Let me suggest that that sort of idea, well, it's only possible because of this thing called pension or Social Security. Because once you're dead, I don't think you're going to be drawing. Although actually, money will continue to flow to your privatized Medicaid company, so it's going to cost us that way too. And what happens is that whoever is cashing those checks, they are benefiting in a small way because they're continuing to be able to take and deposit that money, and also those corporations who get their funding from the Medicaid, because the monthly premiums will continue to be spent, and those who are paying into those to the pension and also into the monthly Social Security, all these different programs. What you're saying is, I don't really care about the generations below me that I don't know. They're not the real humans. They don't have to deal with it. This increases inflation. It eats away at savings, or even the ability to save, and then because even however much you've saved, the real value has gone down because the money's so inflated to keep these persistent flows to the non-living. So what winds up happening is that people aren't even able to buy houses anymore. The traditional way of developing a balance of wealth, of personal wealth management, and then it all goes into this non-living machine mechanism to keep this sort of structure or form, this societal set of means going at the expense of the living, who find themselves not even being able to have necessarily the financial means to have what the ones who are now dead had as a result of these systems.
I can solve the Medicare issue. Just have a social medical system like pretty much every other advanced country does. And then instead of individual money going to some kind of corporation, it's just the general taxes go towards, training or paying for doctors' salaries and paying for the medical equipment and so on. And so then that eliminates that problem.
So you brought up the issue of taboos. I have a cousin, because through my father's side of the family, we're Palestinian.
Oh, cool.
Primarily, actually, 3 centers of the family. Jerusalemite, Moroccan, and Yemeni. And my father, he's like 75% Lebanese, according to
Wow.
the genetic test, because his mother was from Lebanon. But anyway, another branch of that same family, the Gutani family, which isn't always spelled with a K, is UK British trained surgeon.
Oh, cool.
Of course, and then his parents were getting up there, also surgeons living in Kuwait, and they were getting up in age, and he needed to come home to take care of them.
Where's home?
In Kuwait, because so much of the family is spread throughout the world since although we still have plenty who are citizens of Israel and plenty are living in the West Bank and several in the old city of Jerusalem. He's in the waiting room. Okay, there we go. So anyway, long story short, he had to leave and get out of it's like trying to discharge yourself from the army once you're in, because armies and NHS, these are socialist systems with their own set of taboos, the biggest one of which is escaping the system. Because they didn't want him to go home to take care of his own parents. They wanted him to stay and provide the services to the NHS, whatever
Yeah.
hospital they wanted to sign them to. And that was a real set of like stickiness to get out of. And then he went and he went past the protocol, and he kept his father alive at one point in an operating room.
Wow.
So, and now he's still, I don't know if his dad's still alive.
Were they trying to kind of legally stop him from leaving or something? Like, was
I
he-
don't know, but the societal pressures, you were talking taboo,
Oh,
and
right.
those tend to be societal pressures.
Yeah. Well, society here is, I mean, we have a right-wing government that is, you know, that they actually want to sell off the NHS and privatize it. And they have been systematically doing that gradually. And of course, the country, the people of this country really, really support the NHS. But
Right,
our right-wing government is extremely immoral. And
Well, it's easy to,
even they've been offering claps during the pandemic for the workers, but then they gave themselves a pay rise, and they gave the NHS, actually adjusted for inflation, I think it was a decrease in wages, even in this most emergency kind of time.
if the economic sector is a natural monopoly, I have no art. I don't. It's okay in my system. If you want to make that a government function or a sub function of the government, because that's what that particular society chooses. Usually, when you want to privatize something out of the commons, and you've got this sort of commons creation, the NHS.
Yeah.
What the motivating factor seems to be is simply rent seeking, the desire to be able to take, because that's what happened here in the United States in the early 70s with the Kaiser Permanente system out of California. That there was actually in Michael Moore's Sicko, there's a section you can probably find on YouTube where President Nixon is talking about that system and how it interests him. And what that system is based around is the idea of saving money by providing less health care. And then when that's privatized, and private corporations tend to have, since at least the Friedman sort of revolution, one primary and maybe only single responsibility, and that is generating or maximizing profit.
That's the capitalist model
from the system.
I mean, like in America, from the European perspective, firstly, the male wide prevalence of male genital mutilation is very peculiar, but also what is it that you guys do there? Cesarean sections.
Yeah,
there's such a high rate of that. And from a business model, it makes sense. Okay, let's do loads of expensive medical procedures, bankrupt a huge segment of the population every year. Or why I say huge relative to, advanced.
Well, actually, so we have our forms of socialization. Most industrialized nations are hybrid economies, a mixture of with just enough socialism to satisfy what most people in the pull back 20,000 feet or 35,000 feet view.
Yeah.
What most people don't understand is that socialism exists in the ultra rich. Not only that, but socialism and forms of communism are actually the best bed buddies of a billionaire trillionaire set.
Well, the bank bailout was socialist, wasn't it? I mean, socialism for the rich.
Right, exactly. Well, it's the general
privatized profits and socialized debts.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right. So most of those cesareans, they would have been through the Medicaid for pregnant women, and so it was all paid for by the society itself by way of
really?
taxation. Right.
Oh, people don't pay. The American elective cesareans are not paid for by.
I don't know the specifics. I know this, that we had 5 children, my wife and I.
Yeah.
She gave birth. I was just in the room. And they were all home births except for the first one, which was at a birthing center, all by the same midwife.
Sure.
And the particular BCBS of Florida did not pay for one of those births. And then I had changed companies, and they had raised on the company where they didn't pay. They actually, that was when the Affordable Care Act that was